Hello and welcome viewers. You're watching this special presentation of Sansad TV with your host Kriti Mishra. As India stands at a crucial economic juncture, the Economic Survey 2025-26 offers a comprehensive snapshot of the nation's growth story, challenges and emerging opportunities. From macroeconomic stability and fiscal discipline to employment, inflation, manufacturing and the role of technology, the survey sets the context for the union budget. So let's decode the key takeaways of the economic survey and discuss the expectations, priorities and possibilities ahead. Joining us through virtual platform are two very special guests. Mr. Chandra Banerjee, Director General, CII. Also joining us through virtual platform, Mr. Kulin Lalbhai, Chairman, CII National Committee on Textiles and Apparels and Vice Chairman, Arvind Limited. Welcome Sansad TV, gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Great to be here.
Mr. Banerjee, allow me to begin the program with you. And the economic survey says that India is an oasis of macro stability in otherwise turbulent world. How does corporate India read the economic survey 2025-26 in terms of India's medium-term growth outlook and macroeconomic stability?
So I quickly would think, there are a few points. One is state finances as the next reform frontier, while even as the center has been really fiscally very, very prudent. Focus on state finances was always a critical subject for curbing borrowing costs, which can really bring in a lot of investment. Second, of course, the manufacturing sector, the focus on the manufacturing sector is fantastic. Third, of course, the shift from deficit targeting to expenditure quality. This itself will, is very, very, very critical and important. I see that to be a very important point. And again, it talks about managing external vulnerabilities. That today we are living in a very uncertain global sort of world. And the survey highlights, as you have seen, that the exchange rate pressures as a function of global risk cycles in a capital importing economy like India. So, and I think it also really talks very strongly about a few important areas. One is, of course, the urban quality of life as an investment enabler, and very, very importantly, talks about the private sector's role, the entrepreneurial state. It talks about really a joint effort in seeing how we can harness the potential of India as we move ahead.
Well, absolutely. And you're talking about potential of India. Let me take that to Mr. Lalbhai. Sir, the survey also highlights fiscal consolidation alongside growth. From an industry standpoint, is this balance adequate to sustain private investment going ahead?
Yes, I think, we sometimes underestimate the benefits of fiscal prudence. And I think in the world, we are possibly the only major economy that is taking fiscal prudence very, very seriously. And the implication of being fiscally prudent is that, in a sense, you're not crowding out the private sector, because if you have a large fiscal deficit, you are finally going to have a situation where the private sector will not have access to finance at the right rates. And if you want to actually kick off the capex cycle, transmitting the rate cuts in the best way, getting a rating upgrade, these are the things that will change our cost of capital. And I think cost of capital is one of the biggest determinants. So I think one of the great things that last 1 year the government has done is to focus on how do we really stimulate demand? Because whilst on one hand we are trying to make capital cheap, on the other hand, we need to figure out how we can make most industries move towards a 90% plus utilization. So the capex cycle really kicks off. And I think starting from the last budget, the way we started with the income tax cuts, then the rate cuts, and then finally the GST cuts, this is cumulatively a large fiscal stimulus on demand that has come in. And some of these stimuluses take time going through the system. But I have every confidence that this will all add up and bring in that momentum on demand. And we are seeing it in some sectors like automobiles. We even saw it in Q3. We are seeing a huge building construction boom happening in India, both because of real estate industry as well as the infrastructure build out. So you're seeing the boom there as well. And I'm sure it will show itself in other consumables as well. So I'm very hopeful that we will see the private capex cycle coming back with animal spirits.
Well, you mentioned three very important points. I'll take that to Mr. Banerjee. Mr. Banerjee, look at that. GST cuts, rate cuts, tax cuts. This kind of massive stimulation as far as aggregate demand is concerned, what kind of impact do you foresee?
So, where I see it, it is, first of all, the consumption demand in the country has substantially improved. We see rural demand pick up very, very strongly, which is leading, of course, to a greater amount of capex in the private sector, because there are several sectors which have got impacted strongly. So consumption demand, which was sort of really well generated with the GST, what you mentioned, has really led to a great amount of effect positively on capex. Secondly, if we really look at the way Indian private sector has now started investing into there are areas like this, say for instance, cement and many other steel, even if you move into renewable, there are sectors or energy sector, the power sector, there is a substantial addition to capex, and all of this has had a very positive effect on the growth rate. And the third is the attractiveness of capital, both the global capital, which is the global investment, so to say. So investments coming into India is being a very, very strong economy, the strongest probably in terms of fundamentals today and growth. We are seeing a huge attraction of global capital too. So all of this adds to growth. All of this leads to greater employment. All of this really will lead to much faster rate of growth as we go ahead.
Well, absolutely. And since we know that manufacturing has long been the Achilles heel of Indian economy, so let's decode that as well. Mr. Lalbhai, the economic survey places emphasis on manufacturing and value chain integration. Do Indian corporates feel that the ecosystem is extremely competitive now?
There are a lot of efforts that are being put in. I mean, let me start first with what we are doing here in India. I think one of the things which will also trickle in as a very major change will be when the labor codes get implemented fully at the state level. And I think one of the very interesting constructs in the labor code is I think there's going to be a sort of competitive federalism where states are going to get into a zone of saying, how do we really attract industry and how do we use the flexibility given in the new labor code to really attract industry? And that's a fantastic thing. We did the ease of doing business sort of rankings, and that led to a lot of reform at a state level. And I'm seeing something very similar where states are using the new code to already come up with bold reform on labor. Even on the land side, there are so many states trying to make land available. And we talked about capital, which is becoming cheaper. So I think if all the three factors of productivity are heading in the right direction, I think that's one of the critical determinants to get manufacturing competitiveness. And one of the biggest issues India faced was the non-integration to the global value chain. So in my opinion, the EU-India FTA is an absolute game changer. And like take, for example, my industry, which is textiles. The whole world is trying to get out of China. And a lot of that 5-6% trade that has moved out of China has unfortunately gone to Vietnam and Bangladesh because they had an 11% duty advantage over India because of, being least developed countries. And we weren't able to compete. Now, post the India-EU FTA, we will be on a level playing field. Today, India is 7 billion exports to the EU. Bangladesh, which is like a state of India, is closer to 25 billion.
Yes.
So, suddenly we are in a position to integrate into the largest consuming market of the world and dramatically scale up. I think we should have a vision to triple the size of our exports to the EU in the next 5 to 10-year time frame. So if these enablers are coming in where we are integrating, and there are so many FTAs, Perhaps in addition to this, we have Australia, we have Japan, we may sign one with Mercosur, we might sign one with Canada. So almost every major consumption economy in the West, if we are integrated into, it's a it's a reset and it's an opportunity to really leapfrog.
Well, that's a very, very legit point that you're making. Mr. Banerjee, while we can talk about the expectations from the budget and the economic survey, we perhaps need to talk about the big takeaways for you from the India-EU FTA as well.
So, this was, as was described by the leadership of the two countries, as a mother of all FTAs.
Yes.
One of the biggest things that we saw in that FTA was that it was 25% of the world's GDP coming together. And it is also 27 countries at one go that we are able to navigate with. It's a 20 trillion plus, 22 odd trillion dollar economy that we were talking about with when we talk about EU. So all of this shows that there is a huge opportunity for Indian products, Indian goods to be connected. The second piece is, as we climb the manufacturing ladder, the progress that we have seen countries like Germany make in manufacturing 4.0 and smart manufacturing have been just phenomenal. So there is a lot to gain in collaboration as we climb up the share of India's manufacturing in its GDP. The third piece, of course, is the investment piece. Today, the European EU capitals, the EU is looking at avenues of expansion. And if Indian states where reforms, etc., can really need to percolate and is percolating fast in some of the states, we will have this huge opportunity of attracting a large amount of investments from the EU. And last, if I can say that, when we move into when we talk about our connect with the global, world in terms of our investments, in terms of our trade, there is need for us to also look at certain areas where Europe has a good leadership. So, be it sustainability, be it the edge on the way they are focusing on green. So all of this can really help on something called comparative advantage, where we really let them do something which they are very strong about, and let us do something where we can be very much effective. So I think this type of collaboration with the EU will lead to a huge impetus for our companies, our Indian companies, to grow global. And for our products to grow global, our services to grow global, and of course provide opportunities to EU industries coming into India. But actually, when they come into India, they don't come into India only for India. They can export to, some of them are exporting to a large number of countries from India. So it's going to be phenomenal on the global value chain.
Mr. Lalbhai also talks about tripling the size of our exports to EU. Do you share that excitement and that expectation?
Of course. No, absolutely, without a doubt. Tripling is a good target to keep, and there is definitely scope. See what the economic survey also talks about, and here is where we really need to converge that together. The economic survey also talks about Indian private sector focusing on productivity in terms of using technology, and those usages would enable us, obviously, be able to be globally competitive. So being competitive is going to be very important, and this opening up of the barriers through these trade agreements makes not only the large companies like what Kulin represents competitive, but also our supply chain, our small companies, our mid-sized companies becoming competitive. So obviously, the small and the mid-sized companies export a huge amount, and therefore this focus on being competitive would lead to a huge market for our Indian products in the EU. And of course, I find it, as was mentioned by Kulin, in several other parts of the world with whom we are entering into trade agreements.
Well,
very strategic.
Absolutely. On that positive note, let's talk about the union budget. Mr. Lalbhai, what are corporate India's top expectations from the union budget?
I've been asked this question, and for the first time, I am struggling to come up with a very strong set of asks. There are so many asks we usually have, but honestly, the reform engine has been so strong in the last 6 months, and
Yes.
under Modi ji's leadership and the seriousness with which we are doing reform. I mean, a lot of the asks that we as an industry have happened. I'll give you just some examples. We talked about raw material competitiveness, and the QCO orders were revisited. We talked about cost of capital, that has happened. We talked about demand stimulation, that has happened. We talked about labor reform, that has happened. So, actually, I would like to just leave it there that, we have, I mean, the ball is now in the court of business. And I hear that in the union budget there are going to be continued bold reforms. I believe the direct taxation and the customs tax, the whole customs structure is going to get rethink. So there are still bold ideas coming, but I would want to just put on record that there's just a whole slew of reform that is coming, and we as an industry have full faith that engine should continue and will continue, and we are going to have a very nice budget coming our way as well.
Mr. Banerjee, we've already seen big bang reforms. What is the industry clamoring for now?
Yeah, I think, taking from what the economic survey has really come out with, and the economic survey, I would think that would have, we would see some of it getting reflected into the budget, hopefully. One of the things that I would really like to see, quite a few, as Kulit was also mentioning, there are quite a few thoughts, but as we move ahead, in terms of our growth and in terms of our maturity of the economy, I would think that it is now time for us to see how Indian industry, as he said, we can really support and really look at R&D and R&D innovations, focus. These would be very, very critical. And I would see the budget also giving a lot of focus on areas like the AI, and that's going to be very, very critical. The second piece, of course, will be the focus on capex. The government has continued its focus on capex, and I would think an increase by 12% on capex, public capex, would trigger a lot and crowd in a lot of private investment. The third piece is, of course, moving to the states. The reforms, as you said, as you mentioned, reforms is going to be critical, but reforms also in the states, incentivizing the states, the finances of the states need to be strong. So incentivizing them is going to be critical in terms of moving ahead with reforms and staying on course as far as their financial performances are concerned. Of course, another area that I would really look at is deregulation in terms of decriminalization, simpler compliances. That itself will be the next phase of reforms which can be unleashed, and I'm sure the budget can look at it better. And lastly, I would really look at spending by targeting subsidies better without hurting the vulnerables. I think the targeting of the subsidies would help us become much, much, much stronger. So there are lots to do.
Well, those are very, very pertinent points that you're making, Mr. Banerjee. But Mr. Lalbhai, I'll give you the last word on the show. As you said, that competitive federalism will lead to unparalleled policy consistency. Your thoughts on that?
Yes, India, it's more a continent than a country, right? So we have to have a situation where at the last mile, we are able to deliver. And there is a lot in India which is still decided at a state level. And what we have seen clearly is states which are very entrepreneurial and serious on reform. And they are all growing their state GDPs at double digits, in fact, higher than the Indian GDP growth rate. And it shows. So I think states are realizing that unless they step up the game, they will not be able to crowd in the investments and they'll not be able to create the jobs. So I think this framework where, as even Mr. Banerjee was saying, that if the states are incentivized to reform, if the states are incentivized to deliver on the last mile, and you do that by objectively measuring things, by ensuring that fiscal support is given from the center more for the right kind of behaviors and actions, and all that framework is in place. And it's great to see at the hunger at the state level now. We were in Davos.
Yes.
In Davos, there were 5 states, I think, competing for investments. So 10, sorry, my bad. And it shows you competitive federalism at a global stage. So I think it's a great thing for India that people are taking reform this seriously at the state level as well.
Well, absolutely. And we know that for corporate India, the budget is not just about numbers, but about clarity, confidence, and a long-term roadmap that fuels investment, innovation, and jobs. On that very sanguine note, thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Banerjee and Mr. Lalbhai.
Thank you.
Thanks
Great
a lot.
being here.
Well, viewers, that's all we had for you in this edition. Thanks for watching and stay tuned to Sansad TV. Goodbye for now from my side.
To watch more programs of Sansad TV, subscribe to our YouTube channel and don't forget to like and share them.